So in the last video, we were able to see how the circumference is related to the diameter, or is 2 of the radius. And we could see how when you multiply by pi, whatever the diameter is, you can get that circumference. So today we're going to talk about how can we see half of the circumference and a quarter of the circumference. So let's start with mentioning, and I'm going to make this smaller. We're going to start with titling this half of the circumference. So when you do half of the circumference, you are just simply getting the entire circumference right here. And you are trying to find out what one side to the other is. So I'm going to shade this side right here. And we could label and say that this is a half circle. Or another word we could use is semicircle. So if I could find the entire circumference, the formula for half of the circumference is simply the circumference itself, which is diameter times pi, and then you divide it by 2. If you do that, then you are going to get, let's do an arrow here, you're going to get half of a circle like that. I'm going to highlight this formula as well, just for easy finding for next time. So if you have a highlighter and you'd like to highlight this as well, you could do that. And the next section, if we do understand this, should be fairly simple, and that is finding a quarter of the circumference. And so for a quarter of the circumference, you are finding not the circle, but once again, you are now going to find a quarter of it. So this is the section of what we're looking for, and we're going to call this the quarter circle. And so the formula, let's see if I wrote formula for a quarter of the circumference is now going to be the diameter times pi, which is a full circumference, divided by 4. And if you do that, then you are going to get a quarter circle like that. And I'm going to highlight this as well. All right. And this leads to one final piece where sometimes you are going to have to find the distance around a semicircle or a quarter circle. Oops. Underline that. It's going to be the title. So with this, you're going to use your newfound knowledge, but I'm going to give you a formula for this as well. Let's just start by writing the formula of the outside. of, and let's do a quarter circle. So a quarter circle is usually something like this. You're going to have a quarter of a circle, but sometimes the image might also include the line here and the line here. So this is kind of like a giant pizza slice, if you want to see it that way. And you could see that I need to include this right here, which is a quarter of the circumference of the circle. And then I'm going to include this section right here and this section right here. Now, if you can see and imagine, you could actually see that there is an entire circle that goes around like this. Oops, like that. It's not that nice. Let's make it a little bit nicer. And if you notice that, then you could see that these are both the radius. So, how do you find the formula, or what is the formula here? And the formula is going to be the following. So you're going to have a quarter of the circumference plus the radius again. And so you could say that this would be diameter times pi divided by 4 plus, now it's radius and radius, so 2r. Now there are multiple ways to write this. You could also say, if you have the diameter, that this is the diameter times pi divided by 4 plus diameter, right? Because 2r is equal to the diameter. Or, now I prefer using radiuses because it's easier to find the radius usually. So if we're using the radius, we could also convert the two. Actually, you know what? I'm going to draw the arrow. Or this is the other formula that you can use. So you could say, instead of diameter, you could say 2 pi r, right? Or 2 radius times pi divided by 4, because you already have the radius at this point. That's why this is easier. Plus 2r. So there are two formulas that you can use here, and I'm going to highlight both of them. So you could either find the diameter and use the top formula, or you could use the bottom formula with the radius. All right, so sometimes it's easier using the bottom one. It's usually recommended because you'll already have the radius at that point. So then you could rely on using that formula. You could try to memorize it, but if you ever do forget, remember that you're just finding different parts of the circle here. And then that leads to the final bit, which is the formula of the outside of a semicircle and if you're doing that, then you're really finding this right here, and you're finding that section. So you know that this right here is going to be the diameter, and you know that this right here is going to be half of the circumference. So just make sure that you're adding those up. So the formula is going to be half of the circumference plus the diameter. And like what we did earlier, you can actually find two different formulas here. So we could start with, if I use the diameter, now this one would be the easier option because the diameter times pi divided by 2 plus the diameter, right? You're already going to have the diameter at that point. So it's a lot easier to use that formula. Or another formula you could use is if you do find the radius, because remember that this right here is going to be the radius. So that would be 2 pi r, right, using the radius, divided by 2 plus 2r. So that's twice the radius, which makes the diameter. And once again, I'll just highlight these two formula. So you could see which one are you given. Are you given the diameter or the radius? And to finalize this, I will say, if you want to do this, you could say that, oops, let me make that a little bit smaller. You could say that this is the easier method if you want. And for the other one, for the semicircle, this is the easier one. So if you want to have that, just know like those are the easier ones because the circle will already give you the radius or the diameter. And so depending on the semicircle or the quarter circle, so you might want to utilize those formulas since they'll already be handy. All right. So that's like an addition to this first section that we have where you were finding the half of the circumference and the quarter of the circumference, but ultimately this right here are your notes.